Okay, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. If you received an invitation to this webinar, it is because you were part of the incredible response those of us who were here at United Way of Asheville and Buncombe County last September received after Helene. I am here just to give a little bit of housekeeping. My name is Sophia Stephanides Ungert, and I am the Director of Major Gifts at United Way of Asheville and Buncombe County. If you have any questions during the webinar, I ask that you click the Q&A button that you will find along the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it right now, just move your cursor along the bottom of the screen and it should show up. There's a Q&A button right there. Click on there and submit your questions that way. We're going to try to get to as many as possible by the end of the panel discussion. After the webinar is over, you'll receive an email from me with my phone number and my email address. I encourage you to reach out, share your feedback, any questions you may still have, and requests to connect. We'd love to meet you in person. Thank you so much for checking in today, and we will start the webinar. I'm going to pass this off to Dan Leroy, our CEO and President.
Thank you, Sophia, and thank you all so much for being with us today. We're really excited to have this conversation with you all. And I think we're going to get the slide deck started. And so I'm going to ask Sarah to get that rolling. And while she's doing that, I wanted to start with just a moment of gratitude for all of you. And Sarah, if we could put on that first or second slide. Um, I'm sharing here a photograph of the wall, one of the walls in our office, where we've been collecting all of the different notes that have come in over the last year, most of them really in the first month after the storm, from people all over the country who sent their donations, who sent their well wishes to us and our community. And I know that many of you were among those folks. If you go to the next slide, you can see just how many people from how many different places all over the country and really all over the world who stepped forward to support this United Way and this community's recovery. And so I really have to begin with thanks. As we approached the anniversary this past weekend of Helene, it was really important to me that we had an opportunity to thank the thousands of people who stepped up to support this organization and our recovery in Western North Carolina. And give you an update. We felt like we owed it to all of you to give you a picture of where things are today in the recovery, how we've used the dollars that you invested in us, and also to help give you a picture of where we are now and where we're going. We've got some wonderful local experts with us to help tell that story. Before we get into the panel, though, I just wanted to share a few of my own remarks. And as I was thinking about today and about this anniversary milestone, I've been thinking a lot about the important lessons that I've learned personally over the last year and that we've learned collectively as an organization and also as a whole community. And for me, the number one lesson that I have learned is about our own resilience. And this is true for us as an organization, and it's true for our whole community. Some of you may know that I was not in Asheville when Helene hit. I was at a conference in Salt Lake City. And I remember waking up in my hotel room at 4 o'clock in the morning and turning on the news coverage on CNN and seeing images of my own neighborhood, places that were 15 feet underwater, and not being able to talk to my family, not being able to talk to anybody on my team. And I remember the next few hours at the conference, just walking around in a state of shock, really, and sitting in an empty ballroom and just not knowing what to do and not feeling prepared and kicking myself really for not doing a better job of preparing the organization to show up in the ways that I knew our community was going to need us to do so. But in that time when the shock began to wear off and as the adrenaline kicked in, I quickly saw what would become more and more clear over the next days and weeks and months that would follow, which was how ready we actually were. And I think we were ready because of the vast network of relationships that we've been cultivating over many, many years, both inside our community and outside of our community. And really the reputation that we've we've been trying to develop and earn over that time as a trusted partner. And I want to give you a few examples of how that was so instrumental in getting us ready. Because we are a part of a national network, a global network, really, of other United Ways, I had immediate access to leaders from all over the country, from communities that have far more experience responding to disasters than I ever have and ever will, and access to the resources and expertise that I could use to develop a plan before my plane touched the ground in Charlotte just 2 days later. Because of the relationship with United Way Worldwide, I had access to technical experts who could go behind the scenes and build and launch a Helene Fund on our behalf in a matter of hours after the storm, at a time when not only could I not talk to anybody on my team, but none of them had power or internet or cell phone service. And I was able to connect with our partners at Buncombe County at the Emergency Operations Center who did have power and internet, and ask them the question of what we could do to help, and to hear from them that they needed us at the Emergency Operations Center at 8 o'clock the next morning. And I was able to get someone there to do that. And we would have someone there really for the better part of the next couple of months, working alongside with the county, mobilizing volunteers and distributing supplies to partners across the county. None of this readiness was the result of a playbook that we had in place or drills that we ran annually for 5 years. That stuff probably would have helped, but really it was a result of the relationships and the trust that we've been building over many decades that inspired people like you to invest in us so that we could show up for our community. So I want to thank you today for that trust and for believing in this organization and for choosing to support us as you step forward to support Asheville and Western North Carolina as a region. So this is the part, if we weren't on a Zoom, where I would ask you all to stand up and we recognize you and we'd all clap on your behalf. But since we can't do that today, just know how much we appreciate your support. I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today. In a moment, I'm going to ask Sarah to pull up a short video, after which I'll introduce Sarah more formally. She's going to be our moderator today, and she's going to lead us in what I know will be a very inspiring and enlightening conversation with our panel. We'll have an opportunity at the end for you all to ask questions before I close us out at 2 o'clock. So without further ado, Sarah, let's watch the video.
I remember the day of the actual storm when I was sitting on my porch, hearing the trees fall. That's one thing I'll never forget.
Throughout the night, as the storm picked up, I think we all realized that this was something like nothing we had ever experienced before.
This was the first time I ever experienced a hurricane where trees are falling down right in front of me.
I've never seen trees like that or lines at gas stations like that. I mean, it was really like from a movie.
The impact was horrific, and I had friends who lost everything. I had a friend who lost his life.
Many people did not get the evacuation notice and were trying to get out during the storm as the water was rising. People swam.
Immediately after the storm, neighbors helped neighbors. It didn't matter who you were or what your belief system was, you just showed up.
We had some kids that were out clearing debris immediately. We had some that were riding around bikes and trying to find their friends.
We worked with a community right next to the Sonoma River where about 30 plus homes were completely flooded.
Our fire department was the only building that was not untouched, came all the way to the flagpole, but did not get in that building. And so that's where a lot of our operations started.
We eventually found ourselves called to the Jasper Apartments, which is a subsidized apartment complex in my neighborhood.
In a city without running water for 6 or 7 weeks, people did not have a way to cook. And so the need for meals that we provide was exacerbated overnight.
What was fascinating to me was seeing how all of the organizations, nonprofits, grassroots came together to support one another.
What I learned is that I come from a really scrappy community full of doers.
The biggest lesson that I think we took from that is a strong community is incredibly powerful.
I have to say, United Way stepped in as an anchor organization to support many of the smaller nonprofits. And United Way really afforded us the ability to have space to open up a distribution site. We also were able to connect to many volunteers.
We received a donation of $50,000 right at the beginning from United Way, which allowed us to be able to buy tools, to buy construction supplies.
With United Way's support and their funding, we were able to hire additional mental health counselors and have times for our students and our teachers to get support when they were carrying some heavy things.
Well, the United Way has shown up in several ways. They have convened the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group, and through that they've provided funding for disaster case management.
United Way was able to make grants to our organization of about $150,000 to help people pay for things like housing, utilities, heat.
United Way did one of their days of caring and brought the team out and just worked, getting supplies out, distributing food.
The immediacy with which United Way showed up with funding and the simplicity of how they made those funds accessible to us was essential.
When the storm first hit, I didn't think we were at all ready because we didn't have a plan, we didn't have a playbook. But what we did have was we had a network of partners, community, grassroots organizations, businesses, local government, schools. We had strong trust built up within that network. What that meant was that the folks in that network knew who we were and trusted us and could immediately write checks to support us. And we could, in turn, write checks to support our partners who are out there doing the work.
Our goal is to rebuild 50 homes, and so that really empowered us.
And from those relief funds, CPC was able to help well over 500 families.
The coming together was absolutely the shining light.
The way that people showed up at that time was incredibly inspiring, and we really hope that we can retain a kernel of that spirit and carry it forward in our community.
In many ways, you just still see a lot of people suffering, so even though we've come a long way, we really have a long way to go. When you drive through my community, you still see buildings falling into the river, and you still see homes that haven't even been demolished yet. We are all in this together, and if you just show up for your neighbors, other neighbors show up as well, and we can take care of each other.
For me, it's been a blessing and an honor to work with the community and a learning experience.
I am seeing changes. I'm seeing debris being moved out. I'm seeing houses being built.
There's no way that our organization could have stepped up and responded to this disaster in the ways that we did without the support of countless donors and businesses and foundations from all over the country, really all over the world. You made this possible. We could never have responded to this kind of disaster without your support, so thank you. All right. Thank you, Sarah, and you're going to get a chance to hear from some of those same people today on our panel. So I want to start by introducing Sarah Roth. Sarah is the Senior Director of Community Resiliency here at our local United Way. She's also the Interim Executive Director of our Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group. And Sarah couldn't have stepped forward into these roles at a better time, and we couldn't have asked for a better person to do so. Sarah has been with us for over 10 years, She has served as a community partnership manager, a volunteer engagement director. She was the director of our 211 call center. And she jumped right in as the director of our Helene initiatives before moving into her current roles. And so, without any delay, I'd like to introduce Sarah Roth, who will be our moderator after she shares a few words about our United Way response.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Thanks everyone for being here. Oh gosh, I gotta figure out how to get to the next slide. Sorry, hold on. All right. Technical assistance. It won't go.
If you
All
want,
right.
okay, there you go.
There we go. We're in business. Dan sort of introduced sort of who I am, but it's really sort of hard to believe that it's already been a year since the hurricane. I think I've equated my world over the last year to being on a high-speed train. And so really using this opportunity for us to actually take some space and reflect on what that year has been and how it has changed the course of so many lives, and really reflect on what we've accomplished and sort of look ahead to the work that's still to come. So I'm going to start with sort of a little bit of context setting. So this is a disaster that was unlike anything we've experienced before. Asheville and Buncombe County are often seen as a climate haven, but really what this storm showed us is that no place is immune, that we sort of are all at risk. The impact here was massive. So we had over 12,000 homes, residential units that were damaged, more than 1,000 students were displaced from housing, and we have close to 90,000 people who filed with FEMA. And now in a county, Buncombe County, that has just over 270,000 people, that's 1 in 3 people who are looking to FEMA for assistance. Now, FEMA has sort of this concept, they call it the rule of tens. It's for every day of the rescue phase times 10 is how long the relief phase is. And then that number of days times 10 is the number of days in recovery. And based on the math and all the situation that we're looking at an 8 to 10 year recovery. So we're really just at the start of this journey. And I want to emphasize that while these numbers are big, they're not just numbers. These are people, right? These are families, neighbors, teachers, elders, that every one of these represents someone who had to figure out what to do next. And in all of this uncertainty, we saw our community come alive in a way that we have never seen. People showed up for each other. We found ways to organize, to help, to care for each other. And what happened in sort of those hours and weeks and months following the storm was some of the most powerful connections and community response that we've seen. Even FEMA colleagues, when we were sort of talking early on in the storm, they would tell us we've never seen a response like the one in Buncombe County. And that really shows sort of the character and response of our community here. I want to kind of look at this in phases. I'm not going to sort of go into exact detail on each of these, but just want to highlight that there's some of moments that really shaped the path forward for us as United Way. That immediate response was super intense. It was days of rescue, we had widespread power outage, and for many, there was over 50 days without clean water. Now, I remember exactly where I was when I got the text message from the city lifting the boil water advisory. I know exactly the room and the meeting that I was in when I got that text message. And for so many households who had been over 50 days without water, that moment was just a deep sense of relief, that even something as basic as clean water felt like hope. There was something coming next. And so our response in those early days was a lot of mobilization and partnering and finding where we needed to plug in. We worked with the county to activate a 41,000 square foot warehouse. We opened a volunteer reception center and mobilized over 5,000 volunteers just in those first 3 months after the storm. We also focused on getting emergency relief dollars out so they could reach directly to families. We quickly deployed an AmeriCorps and CCC team, and around the same time, we also started to have conversations with FEMA where they were like, hey, you might want to be thinking about long-term recovery, even though we were having those conversations in November of starting to think about this long-term recovery. And since then, we've really connected with volunteers. We continue to listen to our community needs. We're getting funding out the door. We're trying to bring in new resources, and we're starting to support folks through the coordinated process with the long-term recovery group. And as all of this has unfolded, that our role became really clear. It was to connect, to mobilize, and to invest. And that's sort of how I'm framing kind of the rest of this conversation, is around those three strategies. So I think of our response and our work currently around sort of three core pillars of focus. So volunteer and supply mobilization, community investment, and then civic infrastructure and coordination. And together, sort of all of these allowed us to really meet that immediate need, get relief to where it was needed most, and work on building systems that can help us sustain for the long term. So I'm going to go sort of a little bit into each of these to give you just a glimpse of the work that's been happening with those. So the earliest phase, as I mentioned, it was sort of defined by this sense of urgency. Supplies had to move fast, people had to step up, we had to adapt and work very quickly. So volunteer and supply mobilization really became the backbone of that early response. And our job was to really turn sort of individual volunteerism and supply efforts into a coordinated process. So how can we support multiple organizations? How can we get volunteers connected to opportunities? So all of that was sort of part of that initial phase around volunteerism. So volunteers were really the heartbeat of all of that happened in those early days. You saw neighbors that were hauling water, they were cutting trees, they were helping sort of wherever they could, and that grew. There were meal sites, supply distributions, and our hands-on Asheville Buncombe platform became the place to connect all of that energy. So over the last year, we've had about 17,000 volunteer connections that have happened through that platform. We also started working with AmeriCorps and CCC teams for the first time. That brings in a team of about 8 or 9 individuals who can provide dedicated support. And we partnered those members at some of our agencies that we work with to help provide consistent ongoing support. They helped move boxes, they were feeding meals, and they were rebuilding homes. And it hasn't stopped in those first few days. This volunteerism and work supporting recovery has really continued and is really core to our work of being able to connect people with places that still need them and that they want to contribute their skills. Now, it wasn't just about people, right? People are important and valuable, and it's about space. There were a number of things that space comes in as a key factor. We turned our conference rooms in our building into a distribution site, which quickly grew out of that into a large warehouse where we were able to move 2,600 boxes and 76 pallets of goods, all to 68 partner organizations. So really trying to mobilize that energy that was coming in. We were getting supplies in trucks from all over the country and having a place that we were able to sort and distribute and connect with partners. And in addition to supplies, there were other things that our building provided support with. So we provided walk-in support. We had a number of people looking for resources or just looking to volunteer, as well as we provided childcare on site for staff. And that one for me was a huge, huge piece. I have 2 small kids, one who school was closed for over a month, and then a younger daughter who her nanny was not able to come support us because her road had washed out. So she was not able to leave. And us setting up childcare at the office enabled me to have a safe place for my kids to be while being able to step in and respond in the ways that our community needed. Our sort of next bucket area that I want to focus on was our community investment, is really putting the funds to work quickly. We really are making sure that the funding that we are giving out reaches where it's needed most and in ways that are sort of low barrier and is mobilized in a quick manner. thanks to all of you and our community members, we have raised over $9 million and counting. We've distributed millions in direct assistance, like preloaded gift cards or rental assistance, as well as other areas, housing, construction, mental health services, education, and other critical needs. Over this last year, we've funded 63 partners through our Helene Fund, and really focusing on getting trusted organizations in the community the support that they need. And you saw in the video earlier, and we'll hear from Antonio later, but just wanted to highlight one of our partner organizations that we provided funding to in the earliest days after the storm. The funds really were allowed for urgent home repairs in the Alan Campos mobile home community in Swannanoa, and really their work is restoring safety and dignity for dozens of families and allowing those homes to provide that extra funding that allowed CORE to now continue to expand for additional homes in Black Mountain. The last core pillar that I want to focus on is the civic infrastructure and coordination. This is really where we're pulling systems together. So from the beginning, we were connecting 211 data into the County Emergency Operations Center. And then ongoing, we've been convening partners through the long-term recovery group. So it's really about making recovery decisions that are coordinated and collaborating with our partners. So that's really what we're focused on with this area. I'm going to highlight sort of the bulk of the work that's been happening lately with this one, which is around the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group. And in the beginning, our job with this was just getting people together. They asked if anybody could host a meeting to bring together nonprofits, churches, grassroots organizations. And we said, sure, we'll host a meeting. Little did we know that that first meeting, we had over 150 people in attendance. And over time, this has developed into real coordination and a real role for us to play in supporting the infrastructure. So over the past year, I've got some stats here of just the number of organizations and the individuals, but I really want to highlight sort of the number of meetings that have happened with this group, that there's been over 130 meetings over the last year, coordinating and collaborating with different committees, with a steering committee, and really to help sort of guide the direction and the work of the long-term recovery group. And that today our role continues to be as a fiscal sponsor and the staffing partner, helping to provide that infrastructure so that our partners that are doing the direct work can really focus on families, on homes, and recovery, allowing us to step in where we bring our strength of that sort of convening and infrastructure components. And there's a lot to celebrate and success and a lot that we've accomplished over the last year. But as I mentioned, we're looking at an 8 to 10 year recovery. So we're really just beginning, and that we're far from finished. The road ahead is going to take years, and we're in it and focused on it for the long haul. And so we're going to continue to mobilize volunteers, continue to bring in AmeriCorps teams, deploy recovery funds where we can, and to strengthen the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group. But it also means we're sort of looking beyond those things to the pieces that Dan mentioned earlier. Let's have a plan. I had a panic moment last week when they were talking about a storm coming for this week. And I was like, we have no plan in place. Yes, we've done this, but I don't feel ready. And so sort of panic, tried to do a disaster preparedness plan. So those are the pieces that we're trying to think about too, is sort of how do we make ourselves ready and prepared so that we're sort of not thrown into that we feel more prepared and ready to handle it. I want to sort of wrap up kind of my piece of this with just a quote from one of our steering committee members for the long-term recovery group. We have all learned so much from this experience. So much new knowledge has been built in our community of what we're capable of weathering, of each other, of how recovery processes work, of how generous people can be, of how to navigate bureaucracy, to persevere, pivot, and participate. It's all knowledge that we'll apply personally and collectively to any challenge we face in the future. So we've looked at the numbers, talked about the systems, talked a little bit about the strategy, but behind all of that is people, right? Is the people who are doing this work. We've got the individuals and families who've faced loss, but we've got the leaders who have stepped up to help them rebuild. And that's what I want to focus on for this next part of this conversation, is really inviting each of our panelists who are leaders in our community around this work to help us sort of look back, look at where we're at now, and then look ahead together. I'm going to jump into that part and introduce our amazing panelists who I am honored and grateful to work with on a regular basis. And I'm going to start by introducing Gina. Gina Elrod is a longtime community leader with deep roots in Western North Carolina. When Hurricane Helene struck Barnardsville last fall, causing major damage to about a third of the homes in the community, Gina stepped up to help organize volunteer efforts and supply distribution at key local sites like the community center, the elementary school, and the fire station. Since then, she's continued to support recovery in multiple roles. She's a founding board member of the Barnardsville Area Resilience Network, also known as BARN, a nonprofit created in direct response to the storm. Gina also briefly served with United Way to help launch the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group. And today she works with Mountain True as their Resilient Forests organizer, where she's helping to champion clean water, resilient forests, and healthy communities. Thanks, Gina, for being here. Antonio Garcia is originally from El Salvador and has called Asheville home since 2002. He's married with 4 children and has served as the Hispanic Ministry Coordinator for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Charlotte for over 20 years, supporting communities across 6 counties in Western North Carolina. With deep roots in faith and service, Antonio quickly stepped into a leadership role following Hurricane Helene, organizing volunteers and helping neighbors navigate the aftermath. Today, he continues that work as program manager with CORE, where he's leading home repair and rebuilding efforts to families across the region. Thank you, Antonio, for being here. And last, we have Nathan. Nathan West serves as the Director of Operations for the Fuller Center Disaster Rebuilders, where he works alongside volunteers and families to restore not just houses, but hope after devastating storms. With over 30 years of experience in real estate development and home building, Nathan has dedicated his career to creating safe, lasting places for people to call home. As a 6th-generation resident of Buncombe County, he carries a deep love for Western North Carolina and a strong commitment to serving his neighbors both near and far. Thank you, Nathan. Now, each of you have been part of the response in a different and unique way, and so I'm really excited to kind of dive into the conversation and get a sense of your perspective. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we don't see that. All right, so I want to start this conversation sort of with looking back, reflection, looking at sort of the days and weeks, that months that kind of followed right at the beginning. I'm going to start with Gina. So Gina, you were one of the first people mobilizing in Barnardsville after the storm. You stepped into a leadership role, transforming the community center into a trusted neighborhood hub in a time of crisis. What did those early days look like on the ground, and how did volunteer efforts begin to take shape?
Thank you, and thank you for everyone coming together. This is an honor and a pleasure to be here today. What I remember in the early days was how loud it was during the day and how quiet it was at night. You know, at that point, we were all so cut off by road that helicopters became a true lifeline. And so above everybody was the constant buzz. And then at night, with no electricity and no cell phones, it was pretty quiet. As soon as the winds calmed, though, volunteers mobilized immediately. And really in the normal gathering places, like Sarah, you talked about the elementary school across from the post office, the firehouse hub, the community center, the churches, United Way downtown. It was like where people could walk to. In Barnardsville, where I was working, it was if people could walk, bike, take an ATV, and there were some horseback riding to get around, but just big-hearted people showed up. And as soon as the roads, we were really fortunate because Brock Mountain is a major construction company in our area, and some of the guys that live in Barnardsville were stranded with their equipment. And then there were guys outside the valley, and they kind of just met. And a lot of our farms actually provided their land so we could do workarounds and at least be able to get four-wheelers. So we did a lot of supplies moving around with four-wheelers. I remember the night before the storm, I put my shovel by the back door, thinking that, my husband and I, that we may have to clear some ditches on our gravel road. But like Dan said, I don't think anyone expected it to be so bad. And the volunteers that showed up in all types of ways with lots of shovels, clearing lots of houses, were definitely a bright spot.
Thank you, Gina, for sharing. Antonio, I'm going to go to you. So CORE, is a global crisis response organization, but the organization has really become deeply embedded locally. I think, beginning with you joining as sort of a local hire. Can you walk us through what the response looked like with your first project in Allen Campos?
Absolutely, yes. And also thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share part of the journey with everybody. It's been a journey that has given us a lot of new experiences and a lot of lessons. And more than anything, that has shown what we are made of, Asheville, the Asheville community. And those early days where, I mean, to be honest with you all, I know that we just went through commemorating the first year. And for me, it was hard to see images of what happened last year. I tried to stay away from the images because, it was just horrific. I live very close to Allen Campos community, which is basically right next to the Swananoa River. Just live 5 minutes away from there. And right after the storm, I remember feeling a little useless. We had no cell phone service, no way of communicating with anybody. So I was feeling myself very useless because, I'm used to doing ministry and helping out the community and all that. But as soon as we were able to walk the neighborhoods and everything, I remember going to the Allen Campus community with people from my church. A pastor from one of the churches in Charlotte came and celebrated Mass there with the community. And right after that, just walking down in the neighborhood in Allen Campos and seeing the destruction, that the community was enduring, and seeing that literally, no one had been there to help them out. I remember just one family was able to do a little bit of muck out and everything because they had the means of doing that. They work in construction. But the rest of the families were just basically standing outside their homes, waiting for the assistance to arrive. And really just, you could see in their faces the sadness, the deep concern, how could they build their lives back. And so right there, we started organizing volunteers, people from our church. I think one other thing that was very useful was social media. We started posting pictures of what was happening, the need that we had, for volunteers, for tools, for heavy equipment, for everything. And literally the next day, there was a pile of debris outside every home. It was wonderful to see how people just came together, responding to the messages, to the call. And, soon after that, CORE showed up. They wanted to stay in a community where they could identify leadership, where they could be with that community and continue the process of, mucking out and doing that kind of thing. And along with that, some other organizations also joined the effort. And we had United Way, who, you guys have been tremendous in the whole response with us, because when you guys were able to allocate $50,000 so that we could start getting materials, that was just amazing. And we also had some help from other churches, other organizations, local churches, Catholic charities also helped with funding for materials. So all of that was just a way of empowering us so that we can, go back to the community and say, for me, it was just so. I made such a big deal out of the donations that we were receiving. I would tell people, today we got a donation for $50,000. Today we got this donation. Tomorrow we're getting this material. Tomorrow this is happening. And to be able to share that with the community, every time we did that, we were sharing hope with them. Sarah, please let me know if I'm talking too much. But I remember just about a month before the hurricane, we had just bought a tent, a 20 by 40, huge tent, that we were going to be using it for our ministries. And then we set up that tent, and it stood in place for a whole 6 months in Allen campus. We basically, that was our camp, where people volunteers would come and eat. Having volunteers there was amazing. Sometimes we would have about 100 to 150 volunteers helping out during the week. It was a little bit challenging, managing everyone, but it was amazing. We had the families helping with the meals. It was a blessing to be able to be there, and it continues to be. But those were the experiences that I can share at this moment about the early response.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing what the 0 to 60, right? Like it sort of overnight, just things changed. So it's amazing to hear how that played out for you. All right, Nathan, you have been involved in the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group since the beginning, helping really shape the systems that are going to carry us forward in recovery. What did those early days look like, and how did long-term recovery begin to take shape?
Yeah, so those early days started about 15 feet in front of me right now. That morning, the kids and I were standing at one of the windows and watching the winds pick up and the rain come down. And the next thing we knew, that we had trees crashing down on top of the house. And 30 minutes later, we had water running through it. So it was an interesting first day for sure. But once we licked our wounds a little bit and we managed to get everything secured at the house, we worked our way into town. I live in Black Mountain, North Carolina, and we managed to get to the church and saw the pastor. And I just said, Pastor, what are we going to do? And she said, well, today we're going to feed some people. I said, okay, let's feed some people. So we went into the neighborhood and got a bunch of grills, and I think, probably that first day we fed somewhere between 50 and 70 people, but by the end of the week, we were doing about 1,200 a day, which our town didn't have power for 10 days. It didn't have clean water until December. But what was really amazing about that initial moment, and you've heard as a trend in our conversations today, was the people coming together. I describe it as one of the darkest, most beautiful times in my life. The tragedy of pulling your neighbors out of debris piles, coupled with seeing the children of your community working 14-hour days, 7 days a week without complaint, with smiles and just cheer and joy in their souls. And at a moment where adults are wondering, what are we going to do? It really was a dark and beautiful time. As I went through, we began, supply distribution for the church. We ended up sending out about 1.5 million pounds of supplies, at least into Swannanoa, Black Mountain, and then up north into the other regions. But what quickly became apparent to me was what United Way stands for in the sense of the networks and bringing people together. It became very apparent that as we slowly worked our way towards Asheville with communications and power and supplies and things like that, it was connecting these networks and connecting the people that were actively doing stuff. And that really is kind of what long-term recovery is going to look like for us around here. I think that, that's really for me, and how I became involved in the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group was when I made that connection from Black Mountain to Swannanoa Grassroots Alliance, they stood up their organization and helped their community. So as these pockets of communities came together, it just really dominoed and ended up in connecting all the way to Asheville and that long-term recovery group. And I knew early on that I was going to have to figure out a way to fit in the long term. There were too many people that needed help, and I'm very thankful for the long-term recovery group and the opportunity it's given me. And you know, as awful as the disaster was, I think it's made our community just absolutely amazingly so much stronger, and just really thankful for that opportunity.
Thanks, Nathan. And you've been a huge part of that. We're going to jump, and I'm trying to keep an eye on time, but I want to sort of jump into sort of where we're at now, right? Where when you're in, I'm with you, Antonio, when all of the pictures over the last week, it was really hard to like to look at those. So I want to sort of shift now to like, where are we at today? What does the work look like today? How are you seeing the needs shift? So Nathan, I'm going to start with you on this one. You're helping to lead the construction committee and helping to coordinate a lot of major rebuild efforts. So what are some of the kind of accomplishments that you're the most proud of, and what is still ahead as we sit today?
Sure. You know, one of the things that we've been able to do as a long-term recovery group is raise more than $1 million for construction repairs, rebuilds, and things like that. So I think that's one of our greatest accomplishments to this point is to be able to have those funds to be able to distribute to the organizations that are out there doing the work. And that's really what it's about. It's about making those connections. So, you know, it's been an amazing 7, 8 months, 9 months, whatever we're in the long-term recovery group now. But the biggest need that I see is that there's still so much work to be done. Most of what we are seeing now, specifically as far as cases coming in, are things where what we call habitable repairs, where, you know, somebody had damage to their home, but they could still live in it, but they still couldn't afford to fix it. They still couldn't afford to make it right. And so we're starting to see that seems to be the majority of what we're seeing, although arguably just our organization in the last 2 weeks, we've had 11 applications for new construction because there's so many people that have just been waiting and left in limbo. They can't rebuild on their property because Mother Nature took the soil down to the bedrock. They can't put septic systems in. They can't, you know, have safe drinking water. And so what I see as the greatest need moving forward is continued efforts put into the community, because there are still so many people that are going to need long-term recovery groups to help them navigate all the different programs that are available, but to also be able to fill in for those unmet needs of, hey, you know, my roof got damaged, and we ask, well, did you have homeowners insurance because it'll pay for it? Well, no, we didn't have homeowners insurance. So then we can fill in those gaps of people that wouldn't traditionally qualify in certain areas and be able to handle that. So very thankful for the funding that we've been able to raise so far and beginning to deploy that out into the community. And, you know, it's going to take a long time to get everybody back whole. When we look down east for the hurricanes that have happened down there in North Carolina, you know, there's still so much work down there left to do, and it's the same here. So looking forward to continuing our efforts with the long-term recovery group and keep helping.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm gonna shift a little bit, and you already started taking us there. So it's both sort of grounded in what's happening now, but also sort of what's next. So Antonio, I'm going to come to you of sort of what's a lesson that you've learned around building trust and supporting long-term resilience in historically underserved communities? And what do you think recovery efforts need to do better going forward?
Yeah, so it's hard to pick something, from the lessons because so much has been learned in the past year. But one of the things that I think, that stand out for me, again, as I have been doing ministry for so long, is and that also builds trust in the community is how you show empathy to the community that is suffering and how people realize, you walk with them and you show compassion. Um, and when you are trying to be as much genuine as you can be, I think the community is able to trust you. The community is able to open up and to just know that you're gonna be there for the long haul. And for me, that has been a lesson that I have learned in this past 12 months. How willing are we able to show empathy and compassion to the suffering community is what is going to be able to open up doors for that trust to be there. And the other part of the question was, Sarah.
Just sort of, yeah, what do you think we need to do better going forward, if there's anything?
So, because the work is so much so far, it's interesting to hear what you're saying that this is going to be like from 8 to 10 years. So, to be able to say, okay, you know, uh, I don't need to stress out so much right now because this is gonna take so long. I need to chill a little bit personally. I need to chill a little bit and realize, that there's so much to do and we're gonna have the time to do it, you're right? We're gonna have the time to do it and to be able to accomplish our goal. But in order to accomplish that goal, especially for us, as we are managing the construction of about 50 homes and we want to be able to finish 30 of those projects by December of this year. We have so far finished about 8 of those projects. For us, one of the things that we need to do better is staffing our team. There is 2 of us on the ground every day. So we have a person here with us at the office who takes care of, the paperwork and everything, and myself. So there's 4 of us. So I know that one way or the other, our efforts here have to grow, but also we have to grow in capacity to be able to say, okay, we know it might take us 8 to 10 years, but let's see if it can take us 5 years. Let's see if it can take us 4 years. So I think those are the things, the areas where for myself and for CORE, and I would say that that's where we need to work a little better.
Great, thank you. All right, Gina, I'm gonna have you close us out as sort of the last one. And just a reminder, if there's anyone who has questions, you can put them in the Q&A. We likely will not get to them just given our timing, but we can sort of make sure we put together and get stuff back out to folks. But Gina, I just want to sort of, you've seen what community-led response looks like in action. You're continuing today to hold space with neighbors in Barnardsville. And so just want to get, what's a lesson that stuck with you and what does it take to keep that momentum alive as we move into year 2 and beyond? And you've got about 3 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. We've all gotten an education none of us wanted or asked for. And there's that old quote, in the darkness within us may bring forth stars. And some of those stars are, some of the things that remind me is know where that shovel is and know your neighbors. It's those folks that were within walking distance is where it all started. And just how overwhelmed I am with the resilience of my neighbors in West North Carolina and how much I appreciate United Way from the direct support, from gift cards. You helped bring in our first home. Our first real build was because of a collaboration with United Way,
nonprofits and starting. And now with what Nathan says, the cases that we have left that need rebuilds are so complex and so multi-layered that the consulting and the friendship and the support and encouragement from United Way is really appreciated in the Barnardsville area. And for everyone that's, listening in and help donate, thank you.
Thank you all for participating. I want to just highlight how appreciative I am of each of you and your collaboration and work together. I know that our work shows up together all the time, and I really just I'm grateful that I've now had the opportunity to work with you all over the last year, and your wisdom and leadership in this community is so important and so essential that I hope you also take your own time to pause and reflect. And to Antonio's point, I'd like to get off that high-speed train also. So maybe we can all get on maybe a slower, like scenic railway tour together as we move forward in this. So thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Dan to close us out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I want to start by echoing Sarah's thanks for our panelists being here with us today, and really for your incredible leadership over the last year and for the work you continue to do to lead this community in recovery. It's an honor to know and work with each and every one of y'all. And the second most important lesson that I have learned from all this is something that we heard from Sarah, from Nathan, I think on some level from all of our panelists. And that is really how much stronger we all are now as a result of what we've been through to face what we know lies ahead. And this is true for us as individuals, in our organizations, and as a whole community. It's as simple as this: adversity makes you stronger, and we've been through really tough times, and we know we've got a tough road ahead, but we're more ready than ever to face it. And that's in part because all of you, all of our donors, our supporters, our partners, our volunteers, and we're going to continue to need your help as we move forward. So if we could just close with the last slide of how you can help. We continue to need volunteers, and you can find out more on handsonasheville.org, ways you can plug into volunteer opportunities. There are opportunities to volunteer on the committees that Sarah and Nathan spoke about through the Buncombe County Long-Term Recovery Group. And we continue to need financial support. As you can imagine, the pace of donations has gone down very, very quickly from the first few months, and the recovery will be a long-term effort. And so please consider continuing to support us financially as well. And last but not least, come visit us in Asheville and Western North Carolina. That's actually a very direct way that you can support this community. Right now, it's beautiful. It's leaf season. It's never been a better time. Our parkway is open. Our restaurants are open. Our hotels are open. Come spend your money in Western North Carolina. And when you do, please come visit us. We'd love to thank you in person for your support. Thank you all for joining us today.